48 hours after the incident at the trading station, Supreme Commander Velith Prime stood in the Hegemony's war room watching his empire crumble in real time. The massive holographic display showed the scope of the disaster in brutal detail. Hundreds of ships dead in space, orbital defenses offline, communication networks compromised, and supply lines severed across 17 star systems. How? Velith Prime's voice carried the weight of a species that had dominated this sector for 3 centuries. How did we miss this? Admiral Kresh 7, the Hegemony's chief intelligence officer, manipulated the display to show a detailed analysis of the human network. What appeared was breathtaking in its scope and audacity. We didn't miss it, Supreme Commander. We were deliberately blinded to it. Kresh 7's synthetic voice carried none of the emotion that organic species would have felt at such a revelation. The humans have been conducting a deception operation on a scale we believed impossible. The display zoomed in on a seemingly unremarkable human trade convoy that had been operating in hegemony space for 12 years. As the analysis progressed, layer after layer of false identity was stripped away to reveal a sophisticated intelligence gathering platform equipped with sensors more advanced than anything in the hegemony's arsenal. Every human civilian ship, every trading post, every diplomatic mission has been part of this network, Kresh 7 continued. They've been mapping our infrastructure, studying our technology, and placing operatives throughout our society. Velith Prime studied a tactical breakdown of human capabilities. The numbers were sobering. What the hegemony had dismissed as a collection of primitive colonies was actually a unified military force with technology that made their own ships look like museum pieces. The stealth systems alone are decades ahead of our current research, Admiral Kresh 7 noted. Our sensors can't even detect their ships unless they choose to be seen. We've been operating under complete enemy surveillance for at least 20 years. The war room's main screen shifted to show footage from Korath's neural implant, the final transmission from the trading station. Velith Prime watched in growing horror as the human agent moved with impossible speed and precision, dismantling 2 of the hegemony's elite soldiers as if they were untrained civilians. Analysis indicates the human was operating with significant cybernetic enhancement, Kresh 7 reported. Neural implants, artificial muscle fibers, enhanced sensory systems. Technology we thought was purely theoretical. More disturbing was the scope of the coordinated attack. The display showed simultaneous strikes across hundreds of star systems, each one precisely timed to maximize psychological impact. Human agents who had lived among alien populations for years had revealed themselves in spectacular fashion, demonstrating capabilities that redefined what the galaxy thought it knew about humanity. They call it Revelation Protocol, Kresh 7 said. A coordinated unveiling of their true military capabilities. According to intercepted communications, this was their moderate response. Supreme Commander Velith Prime felt something he had never experienced in 6 decades of military service. Fear. Not the tactical concern of facing a challenging opponent, but the existential terror of realizing that his species was no longer the apex predator in this region of space. What are their demands? He asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Complete withdrawal from all human-claimed territories, including the 17 systems we've conquered over the past decade. Reparations for damages inflicted on human colonies. Recognition of human sovereignty over a sphere of influence encompassing 83 star systems. The magnitude of what they were being asked to surrender was staggering. Those systems represented the foundation of hegemony power in this sector, the source of resources and strategic positioning that had allowed them to dominate other species for generations. And if we refuse? Kresh 7 activated another display, this one showing probability analyses based on observed human capabilities. Our military effectiveness has been reduced by approximately 70%. Our supply lines are compromised. Our communication networks have been infiltrated. Our technological advantage has been completely negated. The synthetic admiral paused, processing thousands of tactical scenarios in seconds. If they choose to escalate to what their communications refer to as Phase 3, our analysts estimate total collapse of hegemony space within 36 standard hours. Velith Prime stared at the data, trying to process the scale of their miscalculation. The hegemony had built its power on the assumption of technological and military superiority over younger species. They had crushed dozens of civilizations that dared to challenge their expansion. Teaching the galaxy that resistance was futile. Now they faced an enemy that had been studying them for decades, learning every weakness while carefully concealing their own strength. It was the most complete intelligence failure in galactic history. There's more, Kresh 7 continued. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected massive energy signatures moving through what we thought was empty space. The humans have been building something out there, using stealth technology to hide construction projects the size of small moons. The display shifted to show gravitational anomalies that suggested the presence of structures too large to hide completely. Whatever humanity had been building in the deep void, it was on a scale that dwarfed anything the hegemony had attempted. Battle stations? Shipyards? Velith Prime asked. Unknown. But the power output readings suggest weapons platforms capable of sterilizing entire star systems. The Supreme Commander turned away from the displays, his mind reeling from the implications. The humans hadn't just revealed military parity. They had demonstrated overwhelming superiority in every category that mattered. Stealth technology, cybernetic enhancement, intelligence operations, strategic deception, and now megascale construction projects that suggested resources and capabilities beyond anything the hegemony could match. How do we get this so wrong? He asked, though the question was more directed at himself than his admiral. The humans exploited our fundamental assumptions about technological development, Kresh 7 replied. We assumed that military advancement would follow the same patterns we observed in other species. Instead, they focused on areas where our understanding was limited. The display showed a comparative analysis of human and hegemony development paths. While the aliens had pursued raw power and conventional military doctrine, humans had invested in stealth, deception, biological enhancement, and long-term strategic planning. They also exploited our social blind spots, the Admiral continued. We dismissed them as primitive because their ships appeared inferior and their colonies seemed vulnerable. We never considered that both might be deliberate deceptions designed to encourage our aggression. Velith Prime reviewed the timeline of human hegemony interactions over the past 50 years. Every diplomatic incident, every trade dispute, every military encounter had been carefully orchestrated to reinforce the illusion of human weakness. The destruction of Kepler 442b, which the hegemony had seen as a necessary demonstration of power, had actually been allowed to happen to provide justification for what followed. They used our own actions against us, he realized. Every colony we destroyed, every trade route we blocked, every diplomatic insult we delivered, it all gave them legal and moral justification for this response. The war room's communication systems chimed with an incoming priority transmission. Admiral Kresh 7 activated the display to show a human figure in simple civilian clothing, standing against a backdrop of stars that Velith Prime recognized as the hegemony's core worlds. Supreme Commander Velith Prime, the human said in perfect hegemony standard language. I am Director Chun of the Terran Intelligence Service. I believe you've had sufficient time to analyze our demonstration. The fact that the human was broadcasting from inside hegemony space, apparently without any attempt at concealment, sent another chill through Velith Prime's thoughts. How many human operatives were positioned within their most secure systems? Your deadline expires in 24 hours, Director Chun continued. We require formal acknowledgement of our territorial claims, beginning of withdrawal procedures, and establishment of diplomatic relations between our species as equals. The human's tone was conversational, almost friendly, but the threat beneath the words was unmistakable. Should you choose to refuse these terms, we will proceed with comprehensive demonstration of our strategic capabilities. I trust you understand what that means. The transmission ended, leaving the war room in silence. Velith Prime knew exactly what it meant. The humans would stop hiding their true capabilities and demonstrate the full scope of their technological advancement. Given what they had already revealed, such a demonstration would likely result in the complete collapse of hegemony civilization. Options? Velith Prime asked. Though he suspected there weren't any good ones, Admiral Crush 7 ran through dozens of scenarios, each one ending in disaster for the hegemony. Military response is inadvisable. Our weapon systems are compromised, our ships are vulnerable to unknown human capabilities, and our intelligence networks have been completely penetrated. The Admiral paused, processing additional data streams. Economic warfare is similarly ineffective. The plasma bolt struck Korath exactly where Marcus had aimed, but instead of the devastating impact he expected, the beam dispersed harmlessly against an invisible barrier. Personal shields? The Zilani military leader's head snapped around, his predatory eyes instantly locking onto Marcus's position. Assassin! Korath's bellow shook the cantina as he drew his sidearm, a massive particle cannon that could punch through starship bulkheads. The other patrons screamed and dove for cover as X9 materialized beside his commander, moving with inhuman speed. Marcus rolled behind the pillar as destruction erupted around him. Korath's first shot vaporized a chunk of the wall where his head had been moments before. The Zilani was roaring in his native language, calling for backup while advancing on Marcus's position. Foolish human. Did you think your primitive weapons could harm me? Korath's shield shimmered as debris struck it. I am protected by hegemony technology your species cannot comprehend. Marcus smiled grimly as he pressed his back against the pillar. His implant was already analyzing the shield's energy signature, processing terabytes of data in microseconds. The personal barrier was indeed advanced, but it had two critical weaknesses that Korath's arrogance prevented him from considering. First, the shield was calibrated to stop energy weapons and high-velocity projectiles. It was not designed to handle certain frequencies of electromagnetic radiation. Second, it required massive amounts of power to maintain, which meant Korath's suit had to vent excess heat to prevent overloading. Marcus's implant identified 17 thermal exhaust ports in the Zilani's armor, each one a potential vulnerability. More importantly, his neural enhancement allowed him to perceive the slight time delay between Korath's trigger pull and the weapon's discharge. To an unenhanced human, the gap would be undetectable. To Marcus, it was an eternity. Asset 07, you have multiple hostiles converging on your position. His handler's voice crackled through his earpiece. Hegemony security forces are mobilizing throughout the station. Marcus ejected the plasma rifle's power cell and slotted in a replacement module, one designed for a very different type of energy discharge. Understood. Beginning Phase 2? Phase 2? Korath had moved close enough to hear Marcus's words. You think this is some elaborate plan? You are one human against the might of the hegemony. The massive alien rounded the pillar, his shield shimmering with contained energy. The X9 flanked from the other side, his compound eyes tracking every movement with mechanical precision. Both aliens had their weapons trained on Marcus's position, confident that their prey was trapped. They were right. Marcus was trapped, but that had always been part of the plan. You destroyed Kepler 442b, Marcus said, stepping out from behind the pillar with his hands empty and raised. 10,000 humans. My wife. My daughter. Korath's lipless mouth stretched in what might have been a smile. Ah, so this is personal. Good. Your death will be more satisfying if you understand why you suffer. The Zilani's finger tightened on his weapon's trigger. Your species is a disease that has infected too many worlds. We will cleanse the galaxy of your presence, one colony at a time. Marcus's implant marked the exact moment Korath began his trigger pull. The neural enhancement accelerated his perception until the alien's movement seemed to take forever. In that stretched instant, Marcus activated the modified power cell. Instead of firing a plasma bolt, His weapon released a focused electromagnetic pulse that bypassed Korath's shield entirely and fried the Zilani's armor systems. The massive alien staggered as his personal protection failed, but Marcus was already moving. He rolled left as X9's weapon discharged where he had been standing. The insectoid commander was fast, but his tactics were programmed and predictable. Marcus's implant had analyzed thousands of hours of hegemony combat footage, identifying the behavioral patterns that their military training drilled into every soldier. Marcus came up from his role with a throwing knife in each hand, weapons forged from a crystalline metal that didn't exist in any hegemony database. The blades struck X9 in the gaps between his armor plates, severing the neural cables that connected his cybernetic enhancements to his organic brain. The commander's compound eyes went dark as his enhanced reflexes shut down, leaving him with only his natural speed. Still dangerous, but no longer superhuman. Impossible. Korath raised his particle cannon again, but his armor's targeting system was offline. He would have to rely on his organic senses, which were excellent by most species standards, but laughably inferior to a human with neural enhancement. Marcus was already behind him, moving with liquid grace that made the alien's head spin. The human's enhanced perception allowed him to track Korath's movements while predicting his reactions several seconds in advance. It was like fighting a statue. You want to know what makes humans dangerous? Marcus spoke conversationally as he dodged another shot that came nowhere close to hitting him. It's not our technology or our weapons or our ships. He pulled a small cylinder from his belt and activated it. The device projected a holographic display showing real-time tactical data from across the station. Korath's eyes widened as he saw the scope of what was happening. Every hegemony official on the station was under attack simultaneously. Not by human military forces, but by individuals who had seemed like harmless civilians just minutes before. The arms dealers Korath had been meeting with were already dead, killed by their own bodyguards who had revealed themselves to be deep-cover human agents. It's that we're very, very good at pretending to be something we're not, Marcus continued. Your intelligence services classify us as primitive because that's what we want you to believe. X9 lunged at Marcus with his remaining functional arm, but the human sidestepped the attack and drove an elbow into the insectoid's head. The commander's exoskeleton cracked and he collapsed to the floor, his nervous system shutting down. The Terran Intelligence Service has been operating in hegemony space for 15 years, Marcus explained as Korath spun around frantically, trying to track his voice. We have agents in your military, your government, your private sector. Today's operation isn't just about eliminating you, Korath. It's about revealing what happens when you threaten humanity. The holographic display updated, showing hegemony ships throughout the sector suffering mysterious system failures. Weapons malfunctioning during critical operations. Navigation computers developing fatal errors. Life support systems experiencing cascade failures. Every piece of technology contained components manufactured by human-controlled companies, each one equipped with hidden kill switches that had just been activated. You're destroying entire fleets. Korath's voice carried a note of desperation. This is an act of war. No, Marcus replied, circling behind the alien again. This is a demonstration. We could have triggered these failsafes at any time over the past decade. We chose not to because we hoped for peaceful coexistence. He pulled out his sidearm, a weapon that looked deceptively simple compared to hegemony hardware. But then you started targeting our colonies. You made it clear that you see us as vermin to be exterminated. Marcus's implant highlighted the optimal firing solution, a shot that would pierce Korath's natural armor without killing him immediately. The Zilani needed to live long enough to transmit what he had learned back to his superiors. So we're going to show you exactly what this vermin is capable of. The bullet struck Korath in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending him crashing into a table. The alien's own weapon clattered across the floor, well out of reach. Marcus approached slowly, his gun trained on his target. Your fleet at Proxima Station just lost all power. Your shipyards at Kepler 186 are experiencing total system failures. The orbital defense platforms protecting your core worlds are shutting down one by one. Marcus pulled out a communication device and activated a secure channel. This is Asset 07. Execute Revelation Protocol. Across the galaxy, every hidden human installation activated simultaneously. Cloaked observation posts revealed themselves in hegemony space. Sleeper agents embedded in alien governments transmitted their real identities. Most shocking of all, the primitive human ships that the hegemony had dismissed suddenly shed their disguises, revealing technology decades ahead of anything in alien arsenals. "We've been watching you for 50 years, Marcus said, standing over Korath's bleeding form. "Learning your weaknesses, mapping your infrastructure, identifying your key personnel." The holographic display showed the true scope of human presence in the galaxy. What the hegemony had believed were a few scattered colonies were actually the visible portion of a vast network that spanned hundreds of star systems. Human trading ships were revealed to be sophisticated intelligence-gathering platforms. Human refugees on alien worlds were shown to be advanced scouts and saboteurs. "You thought you were dealing with a young species that had barely learned to leave their homeworld," Marcus continued. "What you were actually facing was a civilization that had been preparing for galactic contact for centuries." Korath tried to speak, but blood filled his mouth. His neural interface was sending desperate signals to Hegemony Command, transmitting everything he was seeing and hearing. "Good," Marcus said, noticing the data transmission. "Make sure they—" The trading station hung in the void like a massive metal flower, its docking arms reaching out to embrace the countless ships that brought goods from across the galaxy. Among the bustling crowds of aliens, one figure stood out not for his size or exotic appearance, but for his complete ordinariness. Marcus Webb sat alone at a corner table in the station's main cantina, nursing a drink that cost more than most people made in a week. To anyone watching, he looked like just another down-on-his-luck human trader, the kind who haunted the outer rim looking for cargo runs that wouldn't ask too many questions. His clothes were worn but clean, his hair needed cutting, and his eyes held the tired look of someone who had seen too much of the galaxy's darker corners. What the other patrons didn't know was that Marcus had been sitting in that exact spot for 3 days, watching and listening. His unremarkable appearance was carefully crafted, down to the slight tremor in his hands that suggested a recovering stimulant addiction. Everything about him screamed harmless to the various species that conducted business in the cantina's shadowy booths. The hegemony had made a mistake when they classified humans as Category 4, minimal threat. That designation meant most aliens barely noticed humans at all. They saw a species that had only recently developed faster-than-light travel, whose military consisted of slow, clunky ships with primitive weapons. What they missed was that humans had spent millennia perfecting the art of killing each other, and those skills translated surprisingly well to a galactic stage. Marcus took another sip of his drink and glanced at the chronometer on his wrist. The target would arrive soon. His handler's intelligence had been precise. Vex Prime Korath, military advisor to the hegemony's Third Fleet, made this stop every rotation to collect his cut from the illegal arms deals that flowed through the station. Korath believed himself untouchable, protected by diplomatic immunity and the fear his species commanded throughout this sector. The Zilani were apex predators on their homeworld, standing 9 feet tall with armored hide that could turn aside most conventional weapons. They had conquered 17 star systems through pure aggression, and their warrior culture dominated hegemony military doctrine. Korath personally had led the assault that glassed the human colony on Kepler 442b, turning 10,000 settlers into radioactive ash. That colony had been Marcus's home. The cantina's main entrance hissed open, and conversations died as Korath strode in. The massive alien's presence filled the room like a physical weight. His black carapace bore the scars of a dozen battles, and the neural interface ports along his skull marked him as one of the Zilani's elite warrior scholars. Lesser species scrambled to get out of his way as he made his way to a private booth where 3 nervous-looking Centauran arms dealers waited. Marcus remained perfectly still, every sense focused on his target. The human ability to remain motionless for extended periods was another trait the galaxy had underestimated. Most species grew restless after a few minutes of inactivity. Humans could wait for hours without moving, a legacy of their persistence-hunting ancestors. Korath settled into his booth, and Marcus could hear fragments of conversation despite the distance. The Zilani were discussing a major weapons shipment, something involving plasma cannons and shield generators, the kind of hardware that could outfit a battle fleet. Marcus filed the information away. Though he suspected it wouldn't matter much longer, his earpiece crackled softly with an encrypted transmission from his handler. Asset 07, confirmed target visual. Marcus touched his collar twice, a gesture that looked like adjusting his shirt but transmitted an acknowledgement signal. The movement was so subtle that even the security sensors throughout the cantina wouldn't flag it as suspicious. Package delivery in 30 minutes, the voice continued. Weather looks clear. Marcus almost smiled at the coded language. In 30 minutes, Korath would receive a package that would permanently clear the weather around Kepler 442b, the Terran. Intelligence Service had spent 2 years setting up this operation, carefully positioning assets throughout the sector. What the hegemony didn't understand was that humans excelled at patient, long-term planning. While other species thought in terms of immediate tactical advantage, humans could execute strategies that unfolded over years. A serving drone glided past Marcus's table, and he ordered another drink. To any observer, he looked like he was settling in for a long evening of serious drinking. The reality was that he was running final equipment checks through his neural implant. A piece of technology so advanced that it didn't officially exist, the hegemony believed humans were technologically inferior, but that was only true in certain areas. Human computers were indeed slower than hegemony quantum processors. Human ships were bulkier and less elegant than their alien counterparts. But in the fields of biotechnology and neural enhancement, humans had made breakthrough, advances that they kept carefully hidden from galactic society. Marcus's implant was a masterpiece of bioengineering, grown rather than built, that interfaced seamlessly with his nervous system. It enhanced his reflexes to superhuman levels, provided perfect memory recall, and allowed him to process multiple data streams simultaneously. More importantly, it was completely undetectable to conventional scanning technology because it was technically alive. The arms dealers in Korath's booth were becoming more animated, their voices rising as negotiations grew heated. Marcus caught references to the human problem and final solutions. His jaw tightened slightly, the only external sign of his reaction. The hegemony was planning something big, something that involved eliminating humanity as a galactic presence. That intelligence alone made this mission worthwhile. But Marcus had more personal reasons for being here. His wife Sarah had been a xenobiologist on Kepler 442b, studying the planet's unique ecosystem. His daughter Emma had been 8 years old, fascinated by the alien flowers that bloomed only during the planet's brief summer. They died with everyone else when Korath's fleet turned their world into a cinder. Marcus's drink arrived, and he paid with untraceable credits while keeping his attention on the booth. Korath was laughing at something one of the Centaurans had said, a sound like grinding metal that made other patrons wince. The Zilani had no concept of mercy or regret. To them, the destruction of human colonies was simply pest control. A new figure entered the cantina, and Marcus felt his pulse quicken. Commander Thex-9 of Hegemony Internal Security, Korath's bodyguard and enforcer. The insectoid alien's compound eyes swept the room with mechanical precision, searching for potential threats. Like all members of his species, Thex-9 possessed enhanced senses and lightning-fast reflexes. He was also completely loyal to the hegemony, his individuality chemically suppressed from birth. This complicated things. Marcus had planned for Korath's usual security detail, but Thex-9 was in a different category entirely. The insectoid settled into a position where he could observe the entire cantina. His forearms resting casually on the weapons at his belt, Marcus accessed his mission files through his neural implant. Reviewing everything TIS had compiled about Thex-9, the commander had been bioengineered for combat. his natural exoskeleton reinforced with synthetic armor plates. His reaction time was measured in microseconds, and his accuracy with ranged weapons was literally superhuman. Under normal circumstances, engaging both targets would be suicidal. But Marcus's circumstances were far from normal. 23 minutes remaining. Marcus began the process of activating his implant's combat protocols. Synthetic adrenaline flooded his system while specialized neural pathways optimized his motor control. His perception of time began to slow as his brain processed sensory input at an accelerated rate. To an outside observer, he simply looked like a man having a quiet drink. The arms dealers were concluding their business. Korath accepted a data pad from the lead Centauran and transferred payment through his personal account. Marcus's implant intercepted the transaction data, adding financial crimes to the growing list of charges against his target. Not that it mattered from a legal standpoint. The hegemony didn't recognize human jurisdiction, and this mission was definitely not sanctioned by any interstellar court. 15 minutes. Marcus reviewed the cantina's layout one final time. 17 exits, 43 patrons, plus staff, multiple sight lines, and cover positions. His implant had already calculated optimal engagement patterns for dozens of scenarios. The key was ensuring minimal collateral damage, while maximizing the psychological impact of Korath's elimination. The hegemony needed to understand that humanity was no longer content to be pushed around. For too long, human colonies had been treated as acceptable losses in alien territorial disputes. Human traders faced discriminatory practices throughout the galaxy. Human diplomatic efforts were dismissed or ignored by species that viewed them as primitive newcomers. That was about to change. Marcus's earpiece crackled again. Asset 07. Package loading complete. Delivery commences in 10 minutes. The arms dealers were gathering their materials, preparing to leave. Korath remained seated, apparently reviewing the data he had received. Vix-9 maintained his vigil, but Marcus could see the commander's attention was focused primarily on the main entrances. It was a classic mistake, assuming Th.